science in. Thank you, Sean. So this is pretty hot off the press science information about the brain, and I hope you'll enjoy hearing it because it's just terribly interesting, and it's something that you might know intuitively, but it is so much fun to see that it's actual science here. So we're going to talk about the predictive brain. And the first thing I have to say is don't forget how important you are. What we're doing for kids here. It is not for the faint of heart. I always love foster parents and people who work in foster care because you are people who have chosen to do hard things. And I deeply admire you. I deeply respect you. And I'm very, very thankful that you're doing what you're doing, even if it doesn't always feel fantastic. I'm an adoptive parent also, besides being an occupational therapist who's run my own pediatric clinic, who's worked in hospital mental health with adults and teens and so on. Doesn't matter what I do. I'm here to talk to you right now. And let's jump in. Okay, the bottom line with this is think about the fact that what we experience in life, in everything, comes just as much from the inside out as what's coming outside in. And that's a really fun concept. And in 2 minutes, they're going to explain this just a little bit.
What if I told you your brain can predict the future without you realizing it? Imagine this. You're about to catch a ball. Before your eyes even see it, your brain has already made a guess about its trajectory.
Mhm.
This is the magic of predictive processing, a concept suggesting that our brain constantly makes predictions about what's going to happen next, filling in gaps in our perception. Ever heard a song lyric wrong? That's your brain filling in the blanks with its best guess. Our senses feed our brain information, but it's our brain's predictions that shape our experience. It's like living with a crystal ball in your head, one that isn't always accurate but mostly gets it right. So, are you really experiencing the world or just your brain's best guess?
So that's a kind of a fun intro, isn't it? Because the truth is that our brains use a lot of energy. Okay, they use up a lot of the energy that your body takes in. And in order to be conserving that energy, it has it's a postulate we think that in order to conserve the energy, there's a lot of prediction going on so that it doesn't have to work as hard and can use the energy in all the ways it has to. So here we go with the next slide. Oh, so what is that?
What if I told you?
What does that mean? Oops, went too far. So what I want to say is people think about prediction and they think they're guessing, that they're making an estimate. But this isn't the brain does more than that. Because one of the things you do when you study brain science a little, even a little bit, you know that there's always more and bigger than we ever thought possible before. The brain is really complicated and not so simple as, this area associates with that body part or any of that. It is much more complex. And one of the things that it's doing is it is building expectations for what happens next based on, as it says here, experience, repetition, and patterns. Just like they said with the ball example, when I'm throwing a ball to you, right? You have had that experience before. You've probably had it repeated a number of times. You've seen patterns, so you know what to do. Okay. This is true for many, many, many of the experiences that you have in life, especially when you are starting to think about your kids. So before a conversation starts, the brain's already making a forecast about what's coming and preparing the body and brain accordingly. Now, think about that. You might not have ever thought about it, but it's worth thinking about that the brain is already looking ahead, looking around the corner to see what's coming because, well, for a couple reasons. Here's one of them. This is comes from Bruce Perry, who's a MD PhD who works in trauma, and he says anything new, even if it's something good, like going to Disneyland or something like that, automatically activates our stress response. And you can think about that, how that works. You just get a little bit of a cortisol hit there, and your default response is uh-oh. Until the new thing is proven to be okay, it can be categorized by a potential threat. And I love this quote about the unknown being one of the major causes of feeling anxious or overwhelmed, because think about the pandemic. Remember that? Most of us have remembered that. Think about how at the very beginning of it, we didn't know what was coming and how frightened people were because of that unknown factor, right? So just again, You take this in context for yourself, take it in context for your kiddos. This is something to, the stress response is, uh-oh, no matter what, when it's something new. It's part of the reason we limit transitions and things like that. Don't want to get ahead of myself, though. So here we go. So these early experiences, most of you know that the first 3 years in people's brains are the time when the brain is exploding with development and new neurons are being formed more than any other time in the rest of a child's life, right? Or a person's life. So you can thank goodness for neuroplasticity, you can rewire, but that first 3 years really does lay the foundation. And here we go with the predictive brain, because the brain activity represents predictions of what you think is going to happen based on, present circumstances, but mostly past experience. And I've got a really interesting video that I have to tell you about this. And it is on. Can you hear it?
When you see this pounding and clapping, your brain is filling in the gaps. There's no sound here. And if you're a fan of the rock group Queen, your brain might even start predicting this filling in of gaps is prediction, and it's how your brain works all the time. Have a look at this. Right now, your brain is working like crazy, searching through a lifetime of experience, making thousands of guesses at once, weighing the probabilities to try and figure out what this is most like. Not what is this, but what is this most like from your past experience? If you still see black and white blobs, then you are in a state that scientists call experiential blindness. Want to be cured of your blindness? So now, many of you see food on a table. Cherries at the bottom, lemons and oranges at the top and to the right, lettuce on the left, and a little bit of ginger peeking out from the bottom left. Why do you see these black and white blobs differently than you did a moment ago? What you see is a combination of what is on the screen and what is in your head. Your brain is doing something really remarkable. It's changing the firing of its own neurons. So you experience cherries and lemons and lettuce when all that's there is a bunch of blobs. So believe it or not, this is not a trick. This is a special example that we built to reveal to you how your brain actually works under the hood. Every waking moment of your life, your brain is using past experiences to predict and create your current experiences. Prediction is why some people see a dress that's black and blue, while others see a dress that's gold and white. It all depends on whether your brain is predicting that you're seeing the dress in the morning or in the evening. Your predicting brain is why you daydream. It's how you imagine all the ways you might save the day. Or win an argument you've yet to have with someone. In every waking moment, your brain is doing its best to guess what will happen next. If your brain didn't predict, then sports couldn't exist. A soccer ball can be kicked faster than 100 kilometers per hour, but our eyes have a delay up to 190 milliseconds or even longer. In the space of that delay, the ball has moved 5.3 meters. Think of how much faster a baseball or a hockey puck goes. Many predictions are at a micro level. Your predicting brain is guessing how much water and salt and glucose your body needs to stay alive and healthy, predicting the meaning of bits of light. It's guessing whether the rustling in the grass is a wild animal or just the wind. Every time you hear speech, Like right now, your brain breaks up the continuous stream of sounds into phonemes, syllables, words, and ideas, all by using prediction. Other predictions are at the macro level. You're interacting with a friend, and based on context, your brain predicts that the two of you will smile at each other. So, you smile first in anticipation of her smile. Your movement then causes her brain to issue new predictions and guide new actions, back and forth in a dance of prediction and movement. Predictions are automatic, effortless, and you have no sense that you're doing them. Yet they make sense of the world in a quick and efficient way. Without them, we'd be deaf and blind. For many years, scientists believed that your neurons spend most of their time asleep and wake up only when stimulated by something in the world. Now we know that all your neurons are firing constantly, nudging one another at various rates. This is called intrinsic brain activity, and it's one of the great discoveries of modern neuroscience. Even more compelling is that this intrinsic brain activity represents millions of predictions of what you will experience next based on all the experience of your past. These predictions all combine into a simulation of the outside world. Prediction turns shapes and sounds into trees and grass and runners. Your brain predicts a honk is from a car, or a honk is from a goose. There's no sound here. What you're experiencing is a consequence of your brain simulating the world. Scientists sometimes call this perceptual inference. Because these predictions are filling in gaps of information that are missing. In fact, seeing something can cause your brain to predict what it will taste like. What it will smell like. What it will feel like. Your brain is predicting all the time, effortlessly, automatically, because predictions are more efficient than reactions. Combining past experiences to create your simulations of the world. And these simulations are the basis for all your experiences and all your actions. This is your predicting brain in action. So, why is it important that you understand that your brain is predicting instead of reacting? The answer is pretty simple. If you understand how something works, you'll be able to go in and tinker with it. Prediction is the key ingredient that your brain is using to process two other ingredients that are necessary for your brain to make motions.
So there you have it. It's sort of a long video, but what do you think? Pretty interesting stuff. And I don't know, I think so many times when we think about our kiddos or even ourselves, you're thinking that we're reacting to things. But according to this processing, we have predictions for pretty much everything. And I think that becomes very important when we start thinking about how our kids are predicting or how we have predicted things in our lives and what we expect from other people's behavior, what we expect from other experiences. So it's part of the reason I think it's just so worthwhile to think about this for a minute. Also, if anyone has any general comments or questions, jump in either in the chat or just, like Shauna said, raise your hand, do anything, because I can talk all day and keep on talking, but I love to hear from other people. So anyway, this is kind of a cool concept. And like I said, I don't think everyone has really considered it. So let's get to again, what we're here for. How does this apply to our kiddos, foster children, adopted children, or our friends or our husbands or whoever? For these guys, often, not 100%, but often in the work that I've done, a potential prediction for kids when they come into care, if they've had abuse or neglect, is I'm bad, I'm unlovable, I'm never safe. Adults are unreliable, they may hurt me. Resources, things I need are scarce, and I have to protect myself. Now, that's a pretty rough thing for a human being when they have had, a difficult time in their early childhood. So that's what I'm thinking about when kiddos come to you, perhaps, with their own predictive brains. This is another sort of medium video here that I want to share because what I'd like for you to do, again, is as you listen, I have to believe that pretty much anyone, certainly anyone that is my age, has experienced some of the things that some of the aspects of childhood trauma here. And it's very specific. They go through 8 impacts of childhood trauma. And I hope you can kind of listen and really try it on. See if you notice anything about yourself, and again, or identify with your child, your foster child, if that is what feels more comfortable. Here we go.
8 impacts of childhood trauma on the brain. Let's get right into it. Number 1, emotional neglect, the brain that stopped expecting care. When a child grows up in a home where emotions are ignored or punished, the brain learns a painful rule: feelings aren't safe. Without emotional feedback, the brain's limbic system, especially the amygdala and the insula, becomes understimulated. Over time, emotional recognition and empathy circuits dull down. Instead of asking for comfort, you learn to self-soothe through withdrawal or control. Your nervous system got stuck in low-power mode, alert enough to survive, but not safe enough to connect. As an adult, you might feel disconnected from your own emotions or numb when others express theirs. That's not a lack of empathy. It's a brain that had to turn the volume down to stay safe. Number 2, verbal abuse, when words rewire the threat system. Constant yelling, criticism, or humiliation changes how your brain hears the world. Each harsh tone activates the amygdala, your internal alarm. When that happens repeatedly, your auditory cortex and threat system start linking language itself to danger. That's why even neutral feedback can trigger anxiety or defensiveness later in life. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational part, tries to stay calm, but your emotional brain has already gone to war. This rewiring doesn't mean you're overreacting. It means your brain learned that words can wound, and it's trying to protect you before they do. 3, unpredictable parenting. the chaos that breeds hypervigilance. When love comes and goes unpredictably, your brain can't settle. The stress hormone cortisol floods your system too often, keeping your amygdala overactive. You start scanning every face, every tone, every pause, always predicting, always preparing. This habit of emotional weather forecasting keeps you safe as a child, but exhausted as an adult. The prefrontal cortex, which handles planning and focus, loses efficiency when it's constantly hijacked by threat signals. You're not scattered or dramatic, your brain just never had a chance to rest. Number 4. Physical punishment. Fear that shuts down learning. Fear changes how memory works. In children who experience physical punishment, the hippocampus, the memory and learning center, actually shrinks over time due to chronic stress exposure. When your brain associates mistakes with pain, curiosity shuts off. You stop exploring, stop experimenting, stop trusting your environment. As an adult, you may struggle with decision-making or self-confidence, not because you're incapable, but because your brain was trained to avoid risk instead of learn from it. You weren't lazy, you were cautious for survival. Number 5. Emotional manipulation, the confusion that rewires identity. When caregivers twist reality, saying things like, "you're too sensitive," or "that never happened," a child's developing brain can't rely on its own perception. This repeated gaslighting interferes with the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, regions that handle truth, memory, and logic. Over time, you stop trusting your own thoughts. The default mode network, the system that helps you know who you are, becomes unstable. You learn to doubt your emotions, your memories, even your reality. As an adult, this often shows up as chronic self-doubt, people-pleasing, or constantly replaying conversations in your head. It's not indecisiveness, it's your brain trying to rebuild a sense of truth in a world that once punished you for having one. Number 6. Constant criticism, the brain that equates love with performance. When approval is conditional, only given when you're perfect, the brain's reward system adapts. The dopamine pathway, which should light up from curiosity and creativity, starts reacting only to achievement. Failure becomes danger. Success becomes relief, not joy. And when that cycle repeats for years, the brain forgets how to feel proud without anxiety attached. This is why so many gifted kids grow into adults who can't relax after success. Your brain was taught that love is earned through performance, and rest is unsafe. Healing means teaching your nervous system that you are enough even when you're not achieving. That safety doesn't have to be conditional. Number 7. Witnessing violence, the brain that lives in anticipation. Even if you weren't the one being hurt, seeing violence rewires your entire stress network. The amygdala stays on high alert, the sympathetic nervous system keeps firing, and the vagus nerve, responsible for calm and recovery, becomes sluggish. You grow up with a body that never feels safe, even in silence. It's why sudden noises make your heart race, or why peace sometimes feels unbearable. Your brain learned that calm is temporary, the quiet before the storm. And so, even decades later, it keeps you ready to run. That readiness isn't weakness, it's trauma, frozen into your physiology. Number 8. Lack of affection, the starved oxytocin system. When a child grows up without warmth or touch, the brain's oxytocin system, the chemistry of trust and bonding, underdevelops. Affection begins to feel foreign, even suspicious. You may crave closeness, yet pull away when it finally arrives. It's not that you don't want love, your brain just doesn't know how to process safety through touch or intimacy. Over time, this can lead to isolation, emotional distance, or cycles of clinging and withdrawing. Your nervous system is still trying to learn what it means to be held without getting hurt. But with patience and genuine connection, those circuits can reignite. Because the brain never stops wanting to belong, it just needs proof that it's safe to. Conclusion: rewiring is possible. Childhood trauma leaves fingerprints on the brain, but not permanent scars. Every pattern you've lived, the anxiety, the numbness, the vigilance, began as protection. And with safety, therapy, and self-awareness, those same neural pathways can be rewritten. Your brain isn't your enemy, it's your oldest survivor. That's all for
Now
today.
that's a lot right there. And it looks like my video's running slower than my mouth, but that's okay. I would like to know if anyone has comments or questions or anything to do with all of that information, and if there's anything in the chat or just say something, because I think it's something to process for a minute or two. There's a lot of information there, and I wonder if anyone has comments or things that they would like to say, either from their own experience or what they've seen, maybe one of their children in general experience. And yeah, put it in the chat, or I don't see a lot of faces from here, but do you have something you can say? Shauna, could you see if there's anything in the chat? Por favor.
Yes, Jill says most of it was too relatable. Former gifted kid cannot relax to save my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think
Jill,
that
can we say same?
mhm. I think that perfectionism and that expectation that you're only loved if you do something positive, if you perform, is far more common than a lot of us would like to admit. I think it's out there for sure. Thank you for saying something about that, and also for being for being honest about your own situation. Because I don't, I mean, I think it would be rare to find anyone who couldn't identify with at least a little bit of that somewhere.
Sally Jill added, also has experienced adoption, which just fits all of the information, the breadth of
Hmm.
the information.
Hmm. Yep. Thanks for contributing. Anybody else have something to add? Okay, Shauna, I'm going to pick on you. Can you think of anything in general, can you identify or with any children you know or anything?
Yes, with an exclamation point and some glitter for sure. I think both within my own lived experience, I was a product of divorce, but that divorce meant that I was living in one nation and I was moved to another, so changing culture and language along with the family shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so that a lot of that resonated with me
Mm-hmm.
and continues to. And then certainly the children we welcome into our home, you can see sometimes their what feels like their reactions or behaviors are outsized or undersized or seemingly inappropriate for what's, oh, don't spill over cried milk, but, or excuse me, don't cry over spilled milk.
Gotcha.
But
Mm-hmm.
even extensions of that, right? Like, but you just got what you wanted and now you're still angry. This does not connect, but it
Mm-hmm.
begins to connect when we take a step back or two and look at the fingerprints that are on their brains from the
Mm-hmm.
situations they've come from.
That's interesting that you say fingerprints too, because I like how they put that on the graphic. But the bottom line, and I hope many of you have learned this before, is there's always a reason for the behavior. You may not know what it is, but when you see these traumas listed and explained, and you combine that with the predictive brain, you can see why we or others are putting out behaviors that may seem like, how does that fit? It may seem incongruous, but when you put it in the context of trauma, you can see that kids are having predictions that are not what we would sometimes hope for. So, what do we do about that?
Sally,
Eight
David asked,
impacts of
oh, David
Yeah,
asked a great question in the chat. He says, how do I
please.
help my foster kids understand that I care and love them?
Mm,
So attachment is underneath that.
huge, huge topic, of course. And I would be more than happy to. I'll do a consult with you about that one because that is complicated and wonderful. But bottom line, from my clinical experience and my personal experience, shoot from the heart, be authentic, be yourself. And I'm going to talk about here how to rewire some of those predictions. But, I have all kinds of little, as an occupational therapist, I have all kinds of little tools and techniques that are helpful. One size doesn't fit all, though. So I can't just sit here and say, oh, do this and this and this. But some of the things on here I think should relate to you. And also, I do consulting about this very thing because that's what you want. That's what we all want. We all want to communicate the caring and love and compassion that you have, which is why you went into fostering at the beginning. I would hope, or it's certainly one of the reasons, is so that you can show them that kind of care and loving that you have. And it's, message sent isn't always message received, but it's one of those things that gradually builds. And especially when you are consistent and authentic, being genuine. Because kids can spot a phony. I don't care if they're two or one. They know when someone isn't, they can pick it up partly because of the hypervigilance, because of the fact that they've been around things that have been inconsistent, people that have been inconsistent. So that's the short answer. But we can talk. Um, Anyhow, that's the other thing that happens here is that the situation, for example, a child comes out of difficult, clearly not positive or functional biological family and comes into foster care. The situation is improved. They are safe, they are stable. They're safe and stable, but the predictive brain doesn't catch up for a while. Okay. It continues to look for the things it was looking for before. Because again, Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, that a lot of people have read, that traumatic stress has actually changed the wiring and makes it so that kiddos will see things that are dangerous when they're not. An example that I've used is when children might see their mom or dad reading a book, okay, or just looking at an article or something, and they're making a puzzled face or making a focused face. And a child who hasn't learned well how to read expressions, because that's usually comes on board about 6 months, but whenever, hasn't always, and they are looking for something that may be dangerous, they may misinterpret that puzzled face or that, kind of wrinkled, lowered eyebrows as something that could be dangerous because it may be a neutral expression. But sometimes when their brain is hypersensitive and trying to protect, they may interpret your facial expression as something that it isn't. And so that's, really hard when you think, oh, I didn't do anything. I didn't act bad. I didn't anything. But a child may show that they're dysregulated. So we'll talk about that. But that's something to remember that, the situation may improve, but it takes some time for the brain to kind of rewire and to kind of know how to predict. And we're going to talk about that more, but it's just important to know. And examples here of predictive errors when you come up for a fist bump, right? And the child thinks, oh, there's a fist. It could hit me. If that's something that's part of their predictive brain. Or when a case manager comes to visit and they're like, hi, here's some sensory toys, here's some whatever. And the child's first thought is, I'm going to have to move. Again, depending on their past experience, depending on what their predictive brain is doing, that's what happens. And sometimes, even when you have a calm environment, there are a lot of kiddos that are like, ooh, something is going to happen. I'd better keep my eyes out. When I was working, I had a pediatric clinic that I still consult in Gig Harbor, Washington, and also I consult online. But um, we would often see kiddos come in and they would be in the therapy gym in the back of the office, but they could hear the door open and close in the front because they were being predictive and they were looking, to see if there was anybody coming. They were hyper vigilant just to be sure that they're safe. I have a daughter who I've had for a number of years now that I adopted, who was always and kind of remains the person who is visually hyper vigilant. But she's really handy now after she's been with us as long as she's been somewhere else. She can find anybody's keys when they're lost. She can find anything because she has this visual skill, like it or not, that was developed when she had to watch out for herself. So I hope you can identify with some of the things that I'm saying, whether it's with yourself or with your kiddos. But it does change the brain when there's been trauma, and it continues to predict something, I would call negative because of past experience. It's what the brain does. So, I wonder, again, if anybody feels like saying, Can you identify, I just did with one of my kiddos about what her predictions in terms of looking for something that might be unsafe or being hypervigilant in a visual way. She was also auditorily hypervigilant, like the kiddo I mentioned in the therapy clinic. Do you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these kind of predictions? Can you name one? Someone? Anyone? I don't care who. Just so that you know what I'm talking about here. An expectation from your child that is inaccurate in a safe, stable place. Okay. I'm not going to say that. Annabelle, please
If
talk to me.
I'm understanding the question correctly, is it
Uh-huh.
that, like an example,
Mhm.
so let's say, I'm thinking of a child that came to our home that has suffered neglect.
Okay.
And so, or like food insecurity. And
Oh, for sure.
so, yeah, I
Uh-huh.
think that's a big one. And so we'll explain, because normally with our children, we don't really have food upstairs in our room, but we have to explain, like we'll give rules in the beginning of like, oh, if we know the situation or the history of the child that comes to our home been in care, then we'll
Mhm.
allow food upstairs and we'll let them know, hey, this is an area where food is available and we're gonna have like letting the child know ahead of time.
Yeah.
Oh, when dinner's coming or where the snacks are, you could have snacks in your room, things like that. Just to provide that, I don't know what it is, but just like to provide
Mhm.
a safe space and understanding that the
I
food is
love
not
what you're
going to
saying.
stop. Yeah.
I love that because the child is basically predicting there's not going to be enough, that,
Hmm.
resources are scarce, like I said earlier, because that may have been in their past. And so they're predicting, ooh, um, my daughter, who came to us at 12, she hoarded napkins, if you can imagine, because there were no napkins in her home where she was before
Hmm.
in her setting. And she really kind of liked napkins. So, because she liked being tidy and that was just her. So, yeah, but your food is 100% because that's survival. And
Hmm.
so a lot of kids do come in with food insecurity and you do find them hoarding it or putting it in their room. And thank goodness for you that you're changing or you were, whatever the situation, if it's still going on or, if it's improved, but that you provided a way and we're going to talk about it, rewire the prediction.
Right.
You're making it like, hey, you don't have to predict that anymore because in this house, there's enough food. You can take it upstairs. You don't have to be under pressure. That's a perfect example, Annabelle. And thank you for describing it just that way because it's very clear that
Hmm.
they a lot of times kiddos will come in with, well, they come in with their experience before and their brain with all of those predictions, like they've said in the previous videos about predictive brain. They've got all of these predictions. It's almost like, just throwing it out there, if we all think about the ball throwing, okay, I'm throwing a ball and you know how to catch it. Imagine if they predict that the ball is thrown, it goes over that way.
Hmm.
That's what's their previous experience has been. It's been that different. And then they come into your house and it's like, ooh, I'm supposed to put my hand here, not way over there, when I may not catch it. Weird analogy, but you get the idea. So thank you for that. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And being aware of that and being aware that the brain is structured in such a way as to predict and knowing that your kiddos are coming in. And yeah, you know that they have different social skills or different expectations. They may be coming from chaos and you have more peace and quiet, or they may be coming from who knows what, and you're trying to keep them safe and stable for sure. But being aware that that is actual brain structure, and so, when if you start to get aggravated or frustrated about it, you can go, that's brain. That's the wiring. That's what it is. But again, we can rewire. We can do that. It sometimes takes longer than any of us want, but we can do it. So I'm going to take each of these down a bit, but this is the sort of outline of what I want to talk about is the
Sally,
strategies. Yes, please.
sorry, just before you move on, there's a couple comments in the chat that I want to make sure
Okay,
we get a chance for, and one participant who
please.
has something they'd like to add.
Love
So
it.
if that's okay.
Of course.
Great. The first comes from Heather, who says, a child who is neurodivergent does all of this before the trauma has even added the effect.
Oh, amen, sister. You
Yeah.
betcha. It is so true because their inner experience with a different, whatever, type of neurodivergence, whatever their brain is predicting completely differently. So whatever their past experience is, they're trying to make sense out of the here and now, and then yeah, throw in trauma as well. You bet. And you know what? Neurodivergence is so common, at least in my definition of it, because I think I'm a sensory person and I think about sensory processing, and I think we're all processing our sensory information differently, even down to the parts about I I strongly dislike spicy food. And I have all my family members like spicy food. So I'm really different than they are. And that shows up when we go out to dinner or when my husband cooks or whatever the kind of thing. So we're all different in our sensory processing. Just like if I go to the eye doctor and you go to the eye doctor, we're not going to come out with the same prescription because all of our vision is different. So my definition of neurodivergent is a pretty broad one. But for whatever thing based on what their brain has experienced. So thanks for bringing that one up. I appreciate that because it's absolutely true. And was there something?
Bethany also offered
Yes.
this example of a phone ringing could mean that the social worker was calling to deliver bad news.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's for you specifically, Stephanie, or someone else, but I can understand that. I can understand that because instead of it being, oh, somebody's, as my mother-in-law said once, oh, it might be someone calling me to ask me to a party, was her predictive processing. Or, oh no, now what? From the social worker. So
Yeah.
it all has to do with how your brain works. And again, that first ring, is uh-oh, uh-oh. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a good one. Appreciate that.
We have another comment and a participant who's now been very patiently waiting
Oh, thank you,
to weigh in.
participation.
So if you want me to just, maybe I can read the comment and then pass it over to the person. Would that work for you, Sally?
Whatever you do is fine.
Okay. So the comment says, all right, just in relationship to this, our son needs to have a label for what is his. I think from moving so many times, and that makes
Ah,
sense. Yeah.
so we want to rewire and update these predictive brains. Please, it took a while to get the predictions. It's going to take a while to redo the predictions. Okay. But we want to harness that predictability as the caregiver, as the parent, and create safe prediction errors, meaning better things for your child to predict or for yourself to predict. Okay. And then I have to, as an occupational therapist, I'm going to always talk about somatosensory kinds of ways because we're always taking in information through our senses, may as well use it. And I want to talk about what co-regulation is, and then the self-regulation of how to keep yourself. I got to talk about self-care because I have to. It's the way that you keep yourself from picking up the chaos and the negative predictions, and you being the one that can be the calm and the person who can help regulate the energy and emotions, especially when a lot of times, when children have had or youth have had negative experiences with other adults, sometimes you can be the enemy. You can be the one that has been predicted because you're the adult that is caring for them, and that hasn't always proven to be positive for them. So I'll talk about these things. This is just a kind of beginning outline. So, first thing is everybody, I hope, knows routine, safe, stable structure. I just have a picture here of a visual schedule that also has writing on it. Simple directions, step by step, before transitions. One of the things I like to say in consultations and working with kiddos is you always want for them to have a success experience somehow. Success breeds success, as opposed to raising the bar so high that someone can't reach it. So I tend to think of it as like when your car is stuck in the mud. If you've ever had that lovely experience, which I have, um, you back up before you try to go forward, and you try to go back and then go a little forward. And I think if you can, and I use that generally, but if you know that a child has an ability to do something, I tend to back up a little and do something a little bit easier first, because then they have a success experience and they're more willing to move forward. Now, I don't know if any of you, I didn't plan on saying this, but I don't know if any of you have ever used Duolingo as a way of learning another language. Okay, one of the things that hooks me into Duolingo and makes me continue to come back to Duolingo is they make it easier much of the time than I can do. So they start me off giving me little easy sentences and words I already know, and then start to introduce harder things. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about with the kiddos because, ooh, I know that word. I have that success. I can do that. And then I will continue to move forward because it's encouraging. People do best with encouragement, not with, I'm going to make this harder for you. I'm going to make this harder for you, especially kids who are either neurodivergent or have had trauma. I'll go with both on that. And sometimes it's both. So point is, make it easy for success, especially at the outset, so that somebody can make good progress and feeling good about themselves. Now, again, with the predictive brain, it makes so much sense to start to initiate a positive routine, simple directions, preparing for these transitions and saying, okay, 5 minutes, we're going to be doing something, even if you have to. I am a big believer in social stories or ideas of, okay, when we go to grandma's house, this is what it's going to look like, whether it's pictures or just a description, whatever your child needs, to just say, this is what we're going to do. This is a fairly new experience, but you remember we did this or not, and just talk it through. Now, this is something that's used with people on the spectrum, but I think it should be used for everybody because a lot of times, don't you want to know? I mean, if I'm going up to a Mariners game, I want to know where am I going to park? What time do I need to get there? What I'm going to run into, I can predict that there are going to be a lot of people, whatever it is, but I still like having guidelines. And I use that because my son is taking me to a Mariners game in next weekend, and he sent me a written printout of all of the things of times that we're doing it. Do you think that made me feel better? You bet, because it's something that I don't do that often. Am I making sense here? That reducing the guesswork and helping the prediction work in your favor. That's what I'm going for. Okay. And what are these safe prediction errors? In other words, you're trying to rewire things and it happens over and over again. So the bottom one here about food may disappear was what Annabelle was saying there about, ooh, this kid maybe has food insecurity. So we're going to make sure that their regular meals and snacks are readily available. And maybe you're allowed to take them upstairs for a little while just because you know that that prediction is predicting disappearing food. Okay. So you can do that. There's plenty of food here. You don't have to worry about that. So that's one thing that you can take off the sort of the stress anxiety part of the prediction, right? Or here you go, if I make a mistake, I'll be yelled at. And if the caregiver sees that the milk is spilled or something has happened that's just an accident like kids have, you can respond calmly and say, "Oh, no, no, no." Or even if a kid hits their brother or sister, you can say, "Nope, we don't do that. This is how we do it." If you have something to say, use your words or distraction, whatever it is, but it isn't going to be a yelling because I have to say, our auditory systems are not good with yelling. Okay. It does, just like we saw in the trauma video there, it really puts us on high alert, just having that louder tone of voice. And I know sometimes some of us yell, from time to time, but I'd love to make it go away and love to have it. Not that everybody has to be calm all the time. I'll talk about that in a minute too. But when someone makes a mistake, to actually come back with some kind of calm, even a little bit elevated, but to, redirection, trying to help and realizing that we're all kind of doing the best we can, even if it doesn't seem like it sometimes. Even when kids are seeming to be manipulative, I think that's a skill they've learned. It's a previous skill, and they're predicting that it's going to work. And the truth is, you don't want that to be the skill that they have, so you want to give them redirection or another skill to replace it. Okay. The other thing is, again, what they said in the video about if I cry, I'll be ignored or mocked. When you see, the greatest thing is when you can have an attuned caregiver who can kind of pick it up when a child is looking sad or, distressed and say, everything okay? Everything okay? Is there something I can do to help? That kind of thing. if it didn't happen before. It's pretty incredible when someone does that. Thinking with my daughter, it was a silly thing, the one that was adopted at 12. What was it? I was putting some towels away in a cupboard, and she was looking for a clean towel, and I just happened to see her in the bathroom, and I said, "Oh, it looks like you need a towel. Here it is." She said, "How did you know? How did you know?" Because nobody had ever really helped her with something like that before. She was fending for herself all the time. So those are the kind of little predictive errors that you want to, provide. Little things that say, "I'm noticing you and I want to help." Hopefully all of these are making sense. The other one is, the yelling thing again. A lot of kids have learned that when an adult gets mad, watch out. Okay. So if you can be the adult that, yeah, you do get frustrated. That is one of the things that happens in life is you can get angry and frustrated, but without losing your stuff. And then saying, "I am so frustrated. This is a, you know, awful situation that I found myself in. I have to understand what I can do to help with this. What can I do to fix this? I am so upset." That is okay. Because I do want kids to know that it's okay to have an array of emotions. They need to know, but they want to see you express those kind of emotions without yelling, losing it, destroying objects, the kind of things that they possibly have seen before. Am I making sense here? And once you start to think about the different ways that you can respond with your child, just to again, stay in the realm of what you want them to do because they're watching you all the time to see how you're reacting and how you're reacting to things. Because again, a lot of kids are so hyper vigilant for their own safety. So if you can go, "Oh, this makes me crazy," it's okay, as long as it doesn't mean that something terrible is going to happen, as they may have seen before. So this is what I'm talking about with changing the predictions. And you can do this. You can really, really do this. It takes some consciousness, and I'll tell you some other ways of how to do it. Now, just a little pause in here. People like therapists and people like me use the word regulated a lot. And not everybody knows that. I hope that some of you do, but not everybody knows what it means to be regulated. They think of it as rules or something else, like in the real world, they use regulated for other things besides what we do in this realm. And what I'm talking about, and the best definition I could find, was to have the ability to assess and match your energy and emotions to the situation at hand. Okay, now that doesn't mean you have to be always externally controlled, but I'm just saying that in different situations, different levels of energy and different emotions are usually the appropriate ones. Okay, there's a range of appropriate ones, but what we hope for, it is, often we want people to stay calm and ready to learn, kind of focused and calm, like in school. Okay, that's important. But I also think that it's regulated if I am, again, at a Mariners game and somebody hits a home run, for me to say, "I'm regulated, I'm calm, and I'm organized," is not the appropriate reaction when you can be excited and happy for something that just happened. Okay. You want to be able to show and match those energy and emotions to the situation at hand, right? Also, when it's time to go to bed. Again, I don't, being ready to learn and alert may not be the way you want to be when you're ready to go to bed, right? You want rather to be kind of winding down and feeling a little calm and relaxed, ideally. Okay. So you, and then of course, important meeting, that's where you want the kiddos to be alert and ready to learn. But it's not, most people think of regulated and use it commonly as somebody who is in the right emotional zone, and it usually means calm. Okay. I'm saying being regulated is being all over the place, but in an appropriate way and with the appropriate level of energy, right? If there's any questions about that, please ask, because I think it's fairly important, to know when I say, "Is your child well regulated?" It doesn't just mean that they have to be calm little Zen people. That's not realistic. Okay. And bottom line, to co-regulate means that the child is picking up your energy and watching you for appropriate emotions rather than dealing with their chaos. You're helping rewire their brain by your appropriate response to different situations. You want them to wire to you, not the other way around. In human nature, sometimes the other way around happens. I mean, I know sometimes that when there's chaos in your household and you haven't the, I don't know, window of tolerance for certain things, it can go the other way. But my hope is that you can help your child to feel safe, okay, and kind of put together with your energy rather than you picking up their potentially chaotic energy. Okay, this is a good thing to kind of reset here a little bit. One of the things that I think is important is how you're taking information in through the body and through your senses. It's hugely important, and it is such an effective way of working with people rather than talking, especially with kids, because their predictive processing may not include, speaking of language, may not include using words. I think cognitive behavioral therapy and some of those things are very helpful, but sometimes the body really does keep the score. And moving the body in these ways, rhythm, singing and dancing, regulates the brain. It's a great way to co-regulate by using your body. I will talk in a minute about favorite sensory tools, about crossing midline, healthy food, using the body that way, having a quiet area. But just watch this for a minute. This is a very structured occupational therapy workout. I would suggest that you do it if you love it, but you don't have to be that structured. You can take a piece of it here and a piece of it there. They also mentioned something about using a metronome. You don't have to have a metronome unless you want to, and you can use it. You can find one on your phone or set one. Anyway, take a look at this, and you can see there are pieces in it that are all very good at co-regulating. This is the healthy kind of co-regulating that I'm talking about here. See what Now, as I said, that's a very structured look. I don't care how many minutes you do it. I don't care if there's anything in there that makes sense to you. You can see how some of my very favorite sensory tools are in there and the rhythmic nature of it and all of that. But it's really the other thing is the playing. One of the best attachment tools you can have and repredictors is to have some fun with your child. Have it playful. Making faces. I love making faces because, again, we were talking about how sometimes people predict neutral faces as being negative. Sometimes just making faces and showing what does it look like when you're surprised? Show me what surprise looks like. Show me what angry looks like. Where do you feel anger in your body? Any of those kind of things doing as a connector with your child when they're calm, not when they're angry, but whatever, can be very funny and playful and also instructive. because a lot of kids did not get that when they were 6 months old or whatever. And it's also, we had masks on for a while when we were in 2020. So it never hurts to think about making faces. And as I said, you can look on here on my list, and I'm going to kind of take that apart just a tiny bit here and say, when you're working, and I'm talking about when your child, the regulation business, when your child is seeming to be upset, you can tell that something's not right. For me, the first thing that I find myself doing when I'm with an individual, child or anybody else that's getting upset, is to press the pause button. Stop a minute, take a breath. It's hard to do when you get caught up in a situation, but for me, I know that I have to take a breath before I react. I'm a passionate person, and I have I have a big personality sometimes. So sometimes for me, I need to pause and think about what I can do first. And that's what I mean by a pause plan. The other thing is, I'm working with so many parents who feel like there always has to be a consequence for some kind of negative behavior. And I would suggest that rather than correct, and I love the connect before you correct, but rather than correct, let's see what's really behind the behavior again. What is causing the frustration? What is causing the upset in the child? That's more important in my mind than correcting the behavior. I think there's going to be plenty of times in a kid's life where they're going to get corrected. But first, to look and say, what is going on with you? Why are you acting that? Why are you feeling this way? Is something happening that I need to know about before you say, no, we don't talk like that to someone. You don't hit your sister. And you kind of go, whoa, what's going on? Before you go into the correction. Yeah, when there's something immediately going on, you could say, no, we don't do that. But always look to the what's why and try to get back to the regulation tends to be pretty effective. You're not going to get it right all the time. And you may just step into, if especially if it's habit, to say, stop it, stop it. But to me, I think it's more effective to look at, whoa, wait a minute. We don't do that. What's going on with you? Kind of thing, because it gets to the root of things a little bit more directly, in my mind. Then a lot of times our lives are so busy. There's media, there's noise, there's confusion. Anytime you can have some sort of down, quieter times, quieter places. And yeah, kids are noisy. I get it. But there are times when if you can have some stimulation reduction, even if it's, okay, we're going to have, you know, half an hour before dinner, everybody, kind of find their quiet place, and we're going to have that, have something that we do with ourselves, maybe reading. I don't love screens, but if it's limited, whatever it is, to reduce some of the stimulation and intensity that kids are facing all the time now. And the everything back to it is the repetition of the calm experiences, of the you're not going to be in trouble. You are safe. If I lose it, I'm not going to hit you. The more you can do those, you are rewiring their brains. And it does happen over time. Like I said, it's never as fast as we'd like. But anything you can do to be straightforward, to be honest, to be caring, it works really well over time. And I can tell you. Here's that pause button. Okay. And I was talking about pause is the best therapeutic tool I can tell you that I can use. Okay, it creates a space for better decisions. It protects a relationship so you don't say something you're sorry for later. I've certainly done that. But stop, settle, and respond. Tell yourself, okay, and this was written for teachers that, keep the student's dignity intact. You don't want to embarrass somebody or shame somebody. These kids who are in foster care, if I can make a generalization, they already feel so much shame. They already feel like they did something to make it happen. They don't always understand. Their brains are, still developing, whatever age. Their brain doesn't finish developing until 25. So, they're still trying to think, what's going on? Did I do this? And again, for you, you're modeling self-regulation. Everything's coming so fast in our world. Everything's happening, happening, happening. To me, a 2-minute pause is a great thing to teach somebody. 2 minutes is a lot too. Give it 1 minute, give it 30 seconds. There are actually, by the way, I will tell you guys, because you're a good group, I think, you can get something like this pause button on Amazon. And not only can you find a pause button, but you can record something. I've used it with kids where they can, record a message after you hit the pause button. So just FYI, I don't work for Amazon, but I will tell you it's kind of a fun tool. Hit the pause button. It is the most and best strategy to show and model for kids that they don't have to respond to everything right away. We don't have to. And it gives you a minute to get some oxygen into your brain and think about what you want to do or how you want to handle something. Nobody gets it perfect, but I do like the pause. Okay, where are we here? Okay, now I'm going to move into resilience a little bit for the last pieces here. So resilience, according to these people that I studied with, this is a wonderful source, criresilient.org. They have it's a lot where I got the predictive brain information at the very beginning, and then I started doing more research about it. But resilience is that capacity. Remember, we talked about adapting for regulation, adapting the energy and emotions. Well, this is adapting to adversity. And these predictions, you're going to go from the scary predictions to I'm safe. And that's a process over the entire lifespan that can be taught and modeled and promoted. What does that mean exactly? You're trying to get to safety to predict that you're going to be safe. So, what is this resilience stuff we're talking about? Well, to develop it, it doesn't just happen, okay? We need to guide our clients or our kiddos to actively cultivate this in calm moments, okay? You're constructing a ship for when things get hard. Better to do it when it's quiet. So you're teaching your kid what can you do when situations happen, and kind of even role play or model or saying, what do you do when your friend acts like they don't like you? How do you handle that? How do you handle this? Whatever comes up with your individual kiddo. And, it takes a lot to talk about in general, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying, and building resilience is also when you're going somewhere like to grandma's house and they haven't been there before, having a little, predictive. What can we do? How can I help you know what's going to happen so that you will manage the situation and feel good about it? Okay. But it doesn't happen spontaneously. It comes along when somebody is teaching and modeling and helping. There is this wonderful card deck that CRI Resilient has. Maybe you can see it in my little box here. There, where they have come up with resilience building blocks in a card deck. And there are a whole deck of them. I don't know if there's 52, but however many there are. And I just picked a few. These are some of the skills that we hope once that, your child is with you, they trust you, they're starting to become comfortable with you, you help them. This is how you teach how to solve problems and make minor decisions. Decisions like, even little ones like what you're going to wear or who you're going to have over or things like that, just to give them a little freedom in the areas that they're going to be safe. To help them think ahead before they act, to help them say, I know you want that toy, but you're going to feel better if you wait until it's your turn. Things like that. Again, you can think of your own examples and then sensing the triggers that may create a negative response. These are the kind of things we hope that you can start to teach your kids. And I know some of that's a little bit advanced, but we have all ages here. So you can see that these are some of the resilience things you can teach. And if you're interested, I can do a whole training on these too, because there's a lot to it about building resilience. But you can see that there's building blocks to it. It doesn't all happen at once, little bits. You're rewiring. And here's some more, because mastering a skill, learning different things can help kiddos develop confidence, help them do the self-care. I know a lot of the kids don't love to do the grooming, bathing, dressing things, but to tell them how good they feel after they've washed their hair, taken a shower. Some of the sensory healthy things to, what can we think of? A lot of kids like deep pressure or, any kind of crashing and things like that, any kind of hammock kinds of swings or beanbag chairs or things like that. Help them to know that that actually makes them feel better if they can seek that out. Leisure skills. What do they like to do that's fun besides screens, please? A little bit of screens, okay. A lot of screens, not so good. So they develop all of these things so they can build new predictions, and their predictions are, I can handle what's coming my way. I can handle it when I have help. I can talk to this safe person. Because again, with all of the resilience skills, guess what? Relationships. pro-social, comfortable relationships with starting with the adults. And I'm talking about the healthy adults. I am not talking about the ones that say you have to act like me or you have to put up with my gaslighting. I'm talking about adults who say, hey, when you're feeling upset, I'm going to be here to help you. Let's have some fun together. I see that you did something right. Yay for you. And let's cheer, yay that you did that. You didn't hit your sister and you found something else to do. Whatever it is, I love building kids up for little things. It doesn't matter what, but anything that you can to give them a success experience so they can start to feel better. And also, I think it's terribly important to find peer relationships if you can that are pro-social, that are positive, that are good, and that you're watching all the time to make sure that they're safe. Okay. But relationships are where it's at. Yes, Miss Shauna.
I just wanted to draw the attention to a comment from Kim in the chat that seems to fit exactly what you're saying. She says, as a teacher, I call it think aloud to model my thinking in a situation. I would
Oh, I love
verbalize
that.
my inner dialogue.
Oh, Kim, you want to do the next training? Go for it. Love it. That is 100%. And I love teachers. I love teachers. You guys are just an aside, put in sometimes very impossible situations of trying to take care of a whole classroom full of neurodivergent kids. Bless your heart. But I like that. I think you are in a position. I know you have to get kiddos academically from one part to another as you go through the school year, but I love that you can model that kind of social emotional regulation thinking stuff that can happen in a classroom because it doesn't always happen at home, as you're well aware. So this is the whole thing. When I'm talking co-regulation I mean with a safe adult. I mean with somebody who's trying to be helpful and trying to, again, nobody gets it right all the time, but who's trying to lead a child to health, to positive, productive relationships. Make sense? That's what we're after. And that's a major resilience factor is knowing I can go to talk to my teacher. I can go to talk to my dad or mom. I can go talk to even my older sister who's, somebody who's involved with me and check it out. That I saw this thing happen. This is how I felt. What do you think of that? Heck, I'm doing it with my adult daughter now because I love to co-regulate with her because she's got good sense and it works together. As we have I certainly do it with my husband. So you can imagine we all need to co-regulate with somebody that's safe. Safe, safe, safe. Okay. One more video that I think is really interesting and see what you think. This is just the last piece of it here.
We know from research on the biology of stress that negative impact of that during sensitive periods of time that's going to sculpt the architecture of the brain can have effects on learning behavior and physical and mental health.
What this is allowing us to say is that these experiences that children come across, that we provide them with in those first 3 or 4 or 5 years, provides the scaffolding. Doesn't guarantee a perfect life later on, but it, in a sense, is an insurance policy. Some experiences are more important early in life than later in life, and therefore it argues for investing in what happens in those first 3 to 5 years.
So persistent stress changes brain architecture. Let me show you this. We know that there are changes in the structure of the nerve cell that's responsible for communication, for the ability of children to respond in their world. This is a typical neuron sitting in the prefrontal cortex. This is a neuron that after it undergoes chronic stress during development, this is the way it ends up. So toxic stress results in architectural changes of fewer connections.
Is not only are they at risk for drug and alcohol dependence, but other aspects of their biology. They're at risk for depression. Maybe nobody's surprised by that. They're at risk for cardiovascular disease earlier.
It's not as though the die is cast and the door slams shut, but it will say to us, if you want to get this kid back on a typical developmental trajectory, if you wait too late, it's going to be like pushing open a 1,000-pound door instead of just having it swing open very gently, which you can do with the right early experiences. The second is, as we understand how experience affects the brain, we're in a better position to do two things: to identify as early in life as possible kids who are at risk for falling off a typical developmental trajectory. And the second is to develop interventions that target specific circuits in the brain.
There's a critical period. There's a period of time during which this profound neglect that they've experienced, right, requires an intervention and enrichment, and it has to happen within a certain period of time in order for it to have its most powerful effects.
The most important ingredient in positive experiences for young children is the responsive adult or set of adults that are there in the child's life who are helping to let that brain be excited about learning and supporting that brain's development.
In addition to trying to focus on getting to the most at-risk populations as soon as possible, and that would be before birth. If I had to just focus on dealing with the situations after birth where you have an infant or you have a toddler, that developing daycare systems where we rank them in terms of their quality, where we provide the resources to encourage them to hire the very best staff. You can't do it on the cheap. That if we start with those systems and generate systems of excellence early and apply those to the most at-risk individuals, that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck.
And that if we then continue to be mindful of how experience writes on the brain, then we're much more likely to have children who wind up being successful, happy, productive citizens of society.
Now, this came from the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, which is a big deal, okay? And just want you to know, if you didn't have the advantage of having a baby, young child, who you could help to wire, it is possible to change the wiring. As he said, it's a little bit like pushing a heavy door open, but it is 100% possible. And, if you may not have it the way that you hope, but I'm going to be the trite person who says that all efforts that you have, that you put forth with kiddos, are worth it. It is all worth it because you just don't know what change you're going to make in their life and the trajectory of their life. Even if you only have them for a short period, if that's the time when their brain can feel safe, if that's the time when they can wire to understand that the world is not such a scary place, that there are people who they can trust, if you can set that up, to me, it's well worth the effort. And all of you who are doing it are my heroes. And I would never say anything that I didn't mean. So,
we know from
okay. In the end, just a summary. The brain is constantly trying to anticipate what's next while managing the uncertainty, and it truly is a survival skill for kids that have had trauma, and I would say neurodivergence as well, because they don't understand what the rest of the world is expecting or thinking of them. It changes the predictions. It changes how strongly a child predicts danger, helping people learn that flexibility, confidence, and strong emotions can be safe, that not every future event has to look like something that happened in the past. That's what we're going for with our kiddos. And I hope that this has all kind of made sense and helped you understand what's really going on, as the lady said in the tape, what's going on under the hood here, because it's pretty amazing. And here I am, and thank you for your time. I mentioned that I do consulting. If someone is interested in having a session with me, there's all of my contact information. I was going to try and stop the share here so that I can actually look at people, which, here we go. Let me go to the next slide, which is nothing. Hello. I don't really want to see me. Escape. And there's that, and then I can stop